Well, so I just spent about an hour, surprise, surprise, recording a video, uploading it, only to find that for some strange reason the last 40 odd minutes of it, there's just absolutely no silence. Thought I might have had a copyright claim or something, but very, very, very rare to see that occurring when you're responding to videos from the Scottish Government. But there is no copyright claim, it's just went silent for some reason, don't know why. So I don't really know what I'm going to do there. Could be a case of trying to redo it. I don't like redoing videos if I can avoid it because it just feels fake, and I don't use scripts or anything like that. Maybe if I did, they wouldn't be an hour long though, you know. But that said, it's one of many videos that came out under the banner of Festival of Politics. That one was obviously about the BAMEs. It's one about feminism, veganism, etc. It's basically all the Scottish Government's little social justice talking points, all encapsulated in hour-long videos, roughly. Really is becoming more and more apparent as the days go on, and more emphasis and talk and attention is brought towards all of these vital points and that make up the utopia all waiting for us, where we all eat bugs and drive our electric cars and whatnot. It's becoming apparent, or it feels to me as if we're on the cusp of seeing their utopia start to take form, you know, slowly but surely. Anyway, that said, don't really want to make another hour-long video. Even though their videos are an hour long, I'm not going to respond to it completely. But this one in particular here, can education build a sustainable society, really did rub me up the wrong way. Purely for obvious reasons. You know, I've made so many videos on, you know, sustainable developments in the past. But it's more about the fact that this video here, in and of itself, is probably one of the most blatant videos where they might as well have come out and said forthright, they're coming for your children, because that is what this video screams to me. They're coming for children, you know. A long march through the institutions, that's been and gone. No. Now they're just coming for your children. You know, like conservatives in America, and they're right to say so to a large extent, will say that, you know, the LGBT activists, like the extremists that are LGBT, they're paedophiles and they're coming for your children type of thing. You know, they're correct to suggest that's what the intentions of some of these people are, and making them words about it. Well, the same thing could be said here. I'm not saying that this guy's a paedophile or whatever. I'm saying that, like, he's coming for your children. They're all coming for your children. That's the whole point of sustainable education, or learning for sustainability, as it's renamed in Scotland, which is just identical, word for word, verbatim, sustainable development education renamed. That's all it is. It's not different. It's the same thing. You know? But that's what it's about. The promotion of the UNCRC, the United Nations Rights of the Child, empowering children, teaching them about their rights. You know? Essentially saying that there's no difference between them and adults. You know? Politicizing them, creating activists, preparing them for a future where they will completely submit to what the UN have in store for them, which is a world which is socially just, equitable, and global power is shared equally, aka the West will have no power. How do you think they're going to reduce those inequalities? Oh yeah, well, they're not going to bring everybody else up, are they? No, they're bringing us down, and you're seeing that already. Yeah. But anyway, that's here nor there. The point is, though, this is children that they're going after. Children! And yet nobody talks about this. It's so difficult not to get pissed off, see shit at this. It fucking infuriates me. How this, and by the way, this guy's weird. Like, I've made a video on him, Bruce Adamson. It's on my channel somewhere, like 2 years ago. If you type in Agenda 21, I can't remember the title, but that was in the title. I think I commented on him then for being weird. He seems to really be in love with this job title that he has, where he represents children and he teaches them about their rights and he speaks so softly. It's like, it's very, very weird behaviour from this man, but yet he seems to be obsessed and dedicated to the cause of promoting children's rights and empowering them, which entails telling them from as young as possible that there's a climate crisis, teaching them about their rights, teaching them about social justice and equity and all the rest of that good shit, which again is just political brainwashing, encouraging protests, encouraging them to get involved, telling them that they have a right to be heard. And they even go so far in this fucking video to start talking about the fact that children are the future. They're the most important group of people alive. Yeah, tell that to the people that couldn't give two hoots about the declining birth rates in Scotland, but the point remains the same again. They are going after children so blatantly with this false illusion of empowerment. Yeah? It's almost, you could honestly call this grooming. That's what it looks like to me. And it's not just him, it's not just the other people in this panel, it's everybody that promotes this fucking shit in general. And the excuse that's they masquerade it as there's a climate crisis as they sit there all so completely calm, cool and collected, you know. Fuck off. Climate crisis, my arse. You know, to summarise, what I've said for some time, and I'm not the only one that has said this, that the COOF was brought in as a means to get in the climate agenda or to accelerate it through the back door. You know? So many of the policies align, so many of the policies are similar. You know, I could go on and ramble about that, but I will simply give you the small little time frame of what occurred. The beginning of the year, 2020, the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, came out explicitly with his New Year message. And he goes on to talk about the need for the Decade of Action. The United Nations unveiled on their website that the Decade of Action was the transformation of society, accelerating the transformation of society needed to be done by the end of the decade if we were to meet the 2030 targets. Well, you know, about a month or two later, we get the big bad COOF. Wow, how inconvenient. Throwing everything into disarray, and immediately calls for everybody to start working together came into effect. But not just that, within a myriad of weeks, if not months, into the so-called pandemic, all the leaders from everywhere around the world were coming out with very key talking points. We can't go back to the old normal. Oh no, we can't do that. We need a socially just recovery, a green recovery, a sustainable recovery. Starting to make a bit of sense. Then we fast forward to the present day where we are now, and oh, you bet your bottom dollar that's where we're fucking headed. Anybody that was a bit sceptical last year, well, they can't be now. Oh, no. As in Scotland's case, we're moving away from gas and oil in favour of the green, sustainable recovery, the economic sustainable recovery that we all wish to see. You know, they want to rejoin the European Union or align their policies with it because apparently the EU match Scotland's values of an economically sustainable, just recovery. Everybody's talking about socially just recoveries. Everybody's talking about just transitions. Everybody's talking about sustainability. And I just can't help but think to myself, way back last year when this all started. Vindication. Anyhow, point in case though, these people are going after children, and I really do think that there's going to have to come a point where other people start to bring attention to this shit. I'm by no means an expert in sustainability. Fuck no, am I an expert. But I'll tell you this much, I put in the fucking effort, and that's not me blowing my own trumpet. I just wish that this shit was kept as far away as humanly possible from children, but it's children that they are deliberately going after. You know? Getting it right for every child. UNCRC bollocks. You know? To name a few. Where do you think the name person scheme came from? Getting it right for every child, you know? And when this UNCRC is implemented into law, that will supersede our own law, and whatever the United Nations say goes regarding our children. But these rights that are going to be implemented, it's just justification to start brainwashing them. They have a right to be listened to and taken seriously. They have a right to know about climate justice, etc., etc., etc. It's just brainwashing. But they disguise it with this nappy, sappy, wishy-washy fucking rhetoric. And it's disgusting. Anyway.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this special online edition of the Festival of Politics 2021 in partnership with the Scottish Parliament's think tank, Scotland's Futures Forum. I'm Bruce Adamson. I'm the Children and Young People's Commissioner, Scotland, and I've also had the privilege of being the chair of the European Network of Ombudspersons for Children this year. And this afternoon's panel is on Can Education Build a Sustainable Society?
Can education build a sustainable society? So what that really means is, if we impose our agenda into the curriculum, will it in turn allow for our agenda to be created in the future? AKA, in layman's terms, if we promote our bullshit to children, will children grow to accept our bullshit and thus go on to advocate our bullshit, or at the very least, submit to our bullshit? Our sustainable society. The buzzword of the century, sustainable. They just love throwing it about. Everybody's using it these days. It's becoming cliche. Fucking wow. I mean, these people are just going after children. You know what I mean?
Held in partnership with my office. And we are delighted that so many of you have been able to join us on this Friday evening, and we have an incredible panel of speakers. But your involvement is really important as well, so join in online. We want to see your questions and your comments in the chat. You're very much part of the discussion along with our expert speakers. And again, two very important people who are joining us are our two BSL interpreters, Heather and Bruce. They'll be helping us all make sure that we can communicate effectively. So thank you so much to them in advance. So how important is quality education for children and adults?
Well, I'll tell you this much. You clearly don't value education that much, considering the fact that the Curriculum for Excellence in Scotland, you know, a beautiful piece of revamped education, it's just a shit show. And the once world-renowned Scottish education is a thing of the past. It's an embarrassment at this point, as the obsession seems to be becoming more and more prominent, where kids are taught more to become activists as opposed to learning anything of substantial relevance at this point, in all honesty. I mean, even we're so far in this video to start alluding to moving away from tests and exams and shit. So almost as if to say, we ain't gonna need it in the future anyway, when every industry's fucking gone because of carbon. But it's fine, because you'll know about sustainability and, all things green. It's fucking mental, It's absolute waffle. So much of this video is waffle. But that's the point. Beneath the waffle hides the blatant malevolence. That they're coming for your children. He might as well have just opened this video up with saying that, "Hi guys, I'm Bruce Adamson. I'm coming for your kids." Well, he might as well have just said that. And I know it's no just him. It's all of them. And I don't just mean all the people in the panel or all the people promoting sustainability. I'm talking about the United Nations have made it pretty damn abundantly clear that the puppets that they control, which is our parliament and all the other ones like Wales, etc., they're going for the kids. They're going via the academic route as young as possible. Primary school children, not just people in high school. Oh, no. Primary children, if they think they could get away with it, they'll probably start promoting sustainability, equity, social justice, and the climate emergency, and the only way that we can solve it, to nursery kids. Kids that can't even walk and talk properly yet. But they'll know all there is to know about the burning ice caps. The total one-sided argument of a so-called climate change. But yet they have the audacity to constantly brag about promoting critical thinking. And fake news, that gets mentioned as well. Fake news, because for some strange reason the people promoting the concept of a man-made climate catastrophe, they're the fucking arbiters of truth all of a sudden. The same people that have completely shut down the opposing viewpoints. Yes. The same people that work in tandem at Education Scotland, who imply that people that are sceptical of COVID vaccinations, quote unquote, are extremists. Those types of people. Fuck off, man, you people. Fucking seriously.
In helping us make informed choices on the environmental impact of our actions and choices.
I see it. Because obviously the narrative is, climate change, really real, really prevalent everywhere. It's happening right now and it's a catastrophe. So everything that we do, we need to, everything we do is an impact on the environment. Fuck off,
How effective is education that's currently available? And what can we learn from other nations and other places? This panel aims to address some of these questions and all of yours in the next 60 minutes, so it's going to be an exciting session. Get involved in the chat. When you do, if you could put in where you are, whether that's in Scotland or somewhere else. We have Emily Farquhar, who is an operational volunteer for 2050 Climate Group. And she also acts as the 2016 volunteer as the COP26, need to get that right, volunteer ambassador for Edinburgh and the Lothians. So you're very welcome, Emily. We also have Liam Fowley, MSYP, who is the current vice chair of the Scottish Youth Parliament.
The Scottish Youth Parliament, another absolute joke.
You know, I don't mean that to be harsh to the kids that are involved within the Scottish Youth Parliament, but it's what gets discussed, really, that rubs me up the wrong way, because I had a wee scan through their YouTube channel, and wouldn't you know, it's climate change this, climate change that, climate change, climate justice, climate change, you know, less meat, less travel via cars, you know, the same shit. So again, another clear-cut example of children being targeted and given this false vision of empowerment, where they think to themselves that they're creating change, they're fighting the good fight, you know? They're just generating little activists that are all activists predicated on beliefs gifted to them by the United Nations and the SNP, etc. That's all this has become. That's all this is. There's no deviating opinions. There's nothing like that. They're all singing from the exact same hymn sheet. I'm sorry, where does a 5 or a 6-year-old know about climate change, climatology in general, climate crises, climate emergencies, or anything of that nature? Where do they get that information from? They're taught it. And then they grow up thinking that to be the case when everybody around them is saying the same thing, because they, like that kid, or the kids in question, the same thing happened to them. And the media promote the same bullshit. The government, they're all working in tandem. But what this video kind of alludes to, and what you're starting to see anyway, is they want to accelerate it. They want to really go after your kids at this point.
Liam was elected as an NSYP for Kilmarnock and Irvine Valley in March 2019. And we have Professor Dave Ray, who is Chair of Carbon Management and Education at the University of Edinburgh. He's also the Director of the Edinburgh Climate Change Institute and a Policy Director at Climate Exchange. So you're very welcome as well, Professor Ray. And the final member of our panel is Professor Pete Higgins, who is a Professor of Outdoor Environmental and Sustainability Education at the University of Edinburgh and Director of Learning for Sustainability Scotland. It is great to see you all.
He was in like all the documents that I was covering in that last video I made on sustainability, or the Sustainable Development Goals. Every single one of them. He was spouting off all this wishy-washy rhetoric.
We've got this great panel. We've got all of you. If you want to join in online on Twitter, the hashtag for the whole Festival of Politics is hashtag FOP2021. So you can join in there. Within this session, as I say, go onto the chat, give us your name and where you are, and any comments or questions, very welcome. So, education and sustainability are closely linked in human rights terms. I've got the best job in the world as Children's Commissioner because it's my job to promote and safeguard the rights of children.
There he goes again. There he goes again. This is what he does. But see that there, immediately, the mention of human rights. What are human rights? Where did most of the human rights that we talk about in the modern day come from? The United Nations. Fuck the United Nations. You don't need legislation penned into law from the United Nations to tell you what you can and can't do with your life. It's just bollocks. All it is the United Nations having the ability to have their laws supersede your own as a country, as a nation. That's all it is. That's all it is. And as the UNCRC so boldly and bravely puts out, it essentially is a justification, a rule book, a justification to brainwash your children, go after them. They have a right to be listened to, taken seriously, etc., etc., etc. So essentially what that implies is, like when you read through them all, it essentially is implying that it's their right to know these things. So you need to teach them about it. So you need to teach little primary 2 or 5 or 6-year-old Johnny all about the climate catastrophe because it's his fucking right to know. Who said so? Well, the UN apparently. So let's teach them all there is to know about social justice and equity and all the rest of that good shit that comes into that sweet, sweet package of sustainability. It's a fucking disgrace.
Children and young people across Scotland. And in terms of human rights to education, the purpose of education is to develop all children and young people to their full...
Oh, yeah, okay. Before the United Nations came along, you know. A human right to education. Yeah, these laws might be applicable in parts of the world where they all live under dictatorships and, you know, they don't know whether or not they're going to eat for the week. But here in Scotland, really irrelevant shit. Really is irrelevant, but yeah, they press on ahead with it anyway.
Fullest potential. And the Convention on the Rights of the Child specifically goes into the fact that the development of respect for the natural environment is a specific requirement on the state.
See, it's a specific requirement. A right to respect for the natural environment, thus justifying them talking all day long about environmentalism to children, because it's the right. See how this works? Fuck's sake. It's a specific requirement on the state.
In terms of education. And we've seen young human rights.
So it's, and this term here. I'll let it speak for itself in case anybody hasn't heard it before. This is what they call children now. I'm not talking about teenagers, they are included, but children too. Children. Single-digit aged children. Naive, innocent children who will believe near enough anything that you put in front of them because they are, as I just mentioned, naive, innocent, young.
Potential. And the Convention on the Rights of the Child specifically goes into the fact that the development of respect for the natural environment is a specific requirement on the state in terms of education. And we've seen young human rights defenders and young environmental defenders.
Human rights defenders. That's what they call these children. With this false sense of empowerment. Teach them all there is to know about their rights and the rights of the child and all that shit. And then encourage them to look into it and empower themselves, know their rights and fight for their rights and attend the protests and all the rest of that good shit. And they get called human rights defenders. That is almost as bad as the old derogatory term of a social justice warrior. It's no difference. And young environmental defenders. Now, where would a child know to become an environmental defender? I wonder. Could it be that he's been taught or she's been taught all there is to know about environmentalism and all that's happening in the world? Whether true or not, whether man-made or not, in schools. So, they're being taught all there is to know about climate change, man-made climate change in school, etc. And then they become human rights defenders, defending the rights of those that are suffering disproportionately, even though they did nothing to contribute to the crisis. Wow, it's just amazing. It really is amazing. So blatant, though.
Really leading the way in terms of our understanding of what needs to change in terms of...
The children are leading the way. Children and young people, so, children, adolescents, they're leading the way in terms of understanding what needs to change. And how would that be? Where did they draw these conclusions? I wonder. Could it be again that they were taught to think this way? Pushed to think a certain way? Pushed in a certain direction to form these conclusions themselves? Because let's be honest here, they can talk about critical thinking all day long, but there's none of that going on here. None of that going on at all.
Sustainability. And so this link between education and sustainability is something that's really important in human rights terms. And so I'd like to begin by asking each of our panelists to summarize reasonably quickly some opening remarks on what is the role of education in building a sustainable society and what does that look like?
Now, obviously, again, a sustainable society, this is supposedly the future that the people in the United Nations aspire to see, people like Sturgeon want to see and envision, etc. The EU, what they claim is the future. Arsehole Justin Trudeau, you name it, they're all saying the same shit. That's the future. We're building that better to a sustainable recovery and we're going to have a sustainable society. So right there, what can education do on that front to contribute to creating the sustainable society? Well, no matter what way you want to slice that little bit of bread that you have left, it essentially boils down to the fact that they will promote this concept via propagandized methods to children in order for them to accept, potentially even advocate, but at the very bare minimum, submit to the sustainable agenda that is being created. It is fucking brainwashing. You are going after children in order for them to become submissible to what is in front of them. You are teaching children to accept Agenda 2030 before they've even reached the age of 10 years of age. and giving them a little pat on the back and calling them human rights defenders as they trot on out the door to preach to the choir about a climate catastrophe that can only be solved if we eradicate capitalism and push for a socially just, equitable world where global wealth and power is shared equally, aka the West must lose the vast majority of its power and spending power in general in order to reduce the inequalities on a global scale by pulling us down to meet their standards. But I'm the greatest business department. I'm just fucking looking at their goals and looking at their global goals, as they call them. It's becoming relatively apparent. I don't see them powering up the poor nations of the world, do you? No. I see them going after every single avenue that generates wealth for our societies, while simultaneously telling us that we need to start considering climate justice initiatives. And Sturgeon, of course, already well ahead of the curve on that front. We need to do all that we can to rectify the wrongs of the past, because the people that contribute the least to climate change, the poor nations of the world, they're suffering the most. Whereas we've done the most to contribute to climate change, and we're suffering the least. Even climate change in and of itself, this one-sided argument completely. There's a climate crisis, and we're all going to die unless we implement all the policies that the United Nations have conjured up for us all. Just trust the plan. If we implement all these goals, the world will be saved. We can reduce the emissions and we can stop the world burning. It's just fucking nonsense.
And if you don't mind, I'll come to you, Emily, first, and then we'll go through in the order that I introduced you is probably a good way to start. So Emily, I'll pass to you.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. For me, the main purpose of education is to provide people with the knowledge, the skills, the values, and the morals they need to integrate into and contribute positively to society.
That's so beautiful. And the worst part about this is she's just... she's only uttered one little sentence and she's already showcased to me that she's just a pawn. I mean, I'm not going to waste time because it's getting late or early, depending on what way you want to look at the time. But she's just near enough word for word reiterated how learning for sustainability and whatnot is defined. Or how it's defined, even. That's all she's done. Exactly what the doctor ordered. A puppet. A useful idiot.
So if you translate that into the context of building sustainable societies and think about how we do that.
No. Let me stop you right there. The only reason that that's now how education is defined is in order for sustainable societies to bear any relevance to the aforementioned. That's not really how I would have defined education back in the day. You went to school and you learnt what you needed to learn so you could go make something of yourself when you left school. That was kind of the purpose of life. But as this video goes on to allude to, no, we need to move away from tests, I think I've said already and whatnot. Yeah, fuck all that shit, come on, man. Sustainability, yeah, sustainable societies, So now it's all about, remember that video that I played of Sturgeon? I've got it somewhere, where she talks about, the curriculum of excellence. It's all about giving children the ability to understand their environment so they can then press on ahead and make change. It's all about change, activism, empowerment. And it's right in your face that you're going to have for your kids. But I suppose if you're a parent that's bought into this narrative of climate change, my carbon, you might think that what's going on here is a modest thing, is a good thing. I think it's downright fucking insidious, if I'm honest. Because no matter what way you want to cut it, what I said about 2 minutes ago is fundamentally the truth. They are promoting Agenda 2030 to a bunch of impressionable children.
The role education can play is to equip learners with the knowledge, the skills, the values, and the morals they need to uphold sustainable and socially just patterns of living.
Socially just patterns of living. To uphold the sustainable and socially just patterns of living, the society that hasn't come into being yet, but the agenda, when it reaches its conclusion, this wonderful utopia that we're all apparently going to be living in, a socially just sustainable recovery, a socially just and sustainable standard of living patterns. But so much wishy-washy rhetoric. But again, fundamentally, what she's just said there is that education provides the tools to promote this to children, steer them in the right direction, chisel them to become sustainable little global human rights defenders.
Their lives. What that looks like for me in practice is schools and other education institutions across the board adopting a learning for sustainability approach to their teaching, which incorporates global citizenship, outdoor learning, and sustainable development education as well, ultimately with the aim of...
Sustainable development education is literally learning for sustainability. I mean, it was in the documents that I made that video on last week. All that's happened here is learning for sustainability is how it's been redefined or renamed in Scotland. I don't know about the rest of the UK, but in Scotland anyway, learning for sustainability is UNESCO's sustainable development education. It's the same fucking thing.
Of producing...
Again, no, this is the sustainable development goals. There is an education programme that goes along with it to promote to children, to get them on board, and it's just been talked about willy-nilly here. Yeah, we need to teach this to kids here. Why?
Well-rounded people who sort of understand and appreciate their environment, their culture and their heritage, and who also have quite a strong connection to nature as well. I think if we can achieve this across the whole of Scotland and ideally across the whole world, the result will be a population who understand the significance of their choices now and in the future as well, which will vastly reduce the risk of irreversible anthropological climate change and various social injustices as well.
Is that what they told you? And various social injustices, yeah. Oh, fuck's sake, man. So just change the way you live your life and we can prevent, irreversible climate catastrophe. It's such bollocks. I'm sorry, it's bollocks. I don't believe it. The climate is always changing. And these people, the United Nations and who is that group, the IPC or whoever they're called, I can't remember off the top of my head, the group that always publish all these damning reports. The fear porn is rife every time. And it's funny, the activists will always refer back to that. They go, the climate crisis is real because, the ICCP report came out last Tuesday and it said so. Like, fuck off. Like, you know what I mean? It's Al Gore, United Nations and whatnot, still saying the same bollocks that they were saying 10 years ago, 20 years ago, just with a different twist, They've been trying to sell this notion that the planet is ending or going to end in 10 years for about the last 60 odd years near enough. It's absolute nonsense. It's a brilliant method of being able to completely obtain control and change the way that you live your life. Fundamentally, every aspect of your life will change and is changing slowly. But it's to save the climate. Yeah, of course. That's why they completely disregard and hide any talk of periods throughout history before the Industrial Revolution where the planet was a lot warmer than it is at present. Can't talk about that. Oh, no, cannot talk about these things because it would destroy their little narrative that they've got going here. The narrative where they try to tell you that it's because of the Industrial Revolution that we are now on a trajectory to a burning world. Then, of course, their hockey stick graph, for example, that they love to throw about in their little PowerPoints and their diagrams, has been near enough completely debunked and refuted. All of the statistics and whatnot that they pump out, all fucking fabricated or at the very bare minimum have been edited, modified. Remember the leaked emails that came out in the early 2000s where they were talking about, I can't remember, what was it called, Climate Gate? Just as I'm reiterating a wee list here, things are just coming into my head one by one because there's so many instances that showcase that something is not right here. How the hell has Al Gore still got any credibility left? Standing there at COP26 talking fucking waffle on Sky News despite the fact that he was one of the main instigators in the early 2000s and whatnot, and he was talking shite. The man should be in jail, or at the very least completely ostracised from society because these people are frauds. Absolute fraud. Power-hungry frauds. That's all they are. With a hate boner for the West and our way of life. Instead of doing things, if that's what they really cared about, to bring up the poorer nations in our world, to raise them up to a standard of living that is deemed acceptable. No, they need to pull our standard of living down because it's our standard of living, apparently, that admittedly things could be done to clean up our environments. Nobody's denying that. But there's total bollocks about you boiling a kettle and that's contributing to climate change and whatnot. Driving from A to B is the be-all. That's a death row to the climate. It's just absolute nonsense. And then you get the puppets like Sturgeon and whatnot who just really boil my urine, who stand there and pretend to be climatologists day in, day out. Do you really think they know anything about what they're talking about? No, they fucking don't. They're just reiterating scripts written out for them, scripts that these people are probably reading out, or at the very least have read at some point during their lifetime. But the fundamental point, because I'm rambling and I'm getting pissed off and I'm tired, is the fact, again, they are going after impressionable children. And the narrative that's being presented here, because society and the system and everything is on their side, it's not like they're fighting the good fight. It's not like they're fighting the system, trying so desperately to achieve change for a better cause. No, they're backed by every aspect of society. And they're going after the children. They've got the green light to go after the children. It's been presented as a socially just good cause. It's fucking evil. Fucking, you have to be a certain way politically to really give a shit about what they claim is a social injustice or social justice issues and whatnot. You have to be a progressive dickhead for a start. So do you not think it's a bit strange, a bit questionable, that what seems to be occurring here is a progressive's wet dream? This is the final form, you could say, of progressivism. It's manifesting.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. That was a really kind of well-rounded introduction to set off our discussion. I'll pass now to you, Liam.
Thanks. Yeah, I think really important would be my automatic response there. We've obviously spoken with a lot of young people. It's all about our organisation. We're here to represent young people, and overwhelmingly young people say that it's individuals that have the responsibility when it comes to tackling climate change, but they need to be supported in doing so. We can't just all be climate experts, because it is a very complex subject.
Oh yeah, but you all seem to know so much about it, including the little fucking primary 2 and 3-year-olds. Such a complex subject. You know, it's very complex, but it doesn't stop the children standing there at protests and being encouraged to do so. Strange. Very strange that you acknowledge it's a complex subject, but yet you spend an awful lot of time talking about it as if you know what you're talking about, and I don't think any of these kids know what they're talking about. I think that a lot of these kids, including himself, are completely misled because they're being presented one version of events, rubber stamped by the United Nations, etc., etc., and there is no alternative facts. There is no counter argument. It is one way thinking, and that's all that it's ever been. And as a result, it then generates the little activists, etc., and here we are.
Young people themselves will admit that. I'll admit that the complexities of climate change are vast. So being supported into knowing how to tackle climate change is a really important one. The Learning for Sustainability Action Plan has obviously been published and things like that, and that's a really important element there. But it's about addressing the needs of young people there as well, because the learning that an adult may have to do who's gone through most of their life is going to be vastly different to that of someone who's in secondary school. In schools themselves, there needs to be more of a well-rounded approach. All subject areas should have a responsibility there to discuss sustainability and climate change, because they're all interlinked no matter what classroom you go into. So it is a really important element, and ultimately young people need to be supported in learning how to live sustainably.
Brilliant. Thanks, Liam. And again, coming through strongly already, this idea that everything's interlinked and shouldn't be kind of pigeonholed. And so passing now to you, Professor Ain.
Thanks, Bruce. Yeah, and all the best things have been said already. Poor Pete's got to come after me, but I haven't got a huge amount to add to what has already been said, other than admitting my own bias as someone who loves teaching and as an educator. You know, it's fundamental in terms of a sustainable future for our planet, not just the people on it, but our natural ecosystems as well. Education's at the heart of all the sustainable development goals. You know, if we look at the challenges that we faced throughout human history, we've got through them well where we've had good information and good education, and we've really faltered where we haven't had that. And the pandemic is an ongoing example of successes and failures. I think what it looks like for me is we've talked about integrating things. It's really that systems thinking, and this is at every level in terms of the education, you know, the lifelong education. It's being able to understand the links between what you do and the implications of that, how everything we do in our lives has is linked to what everyone else is doing and to those natural ecosystems. And so that systems thinking, I think, is at the heart of it for me in terms of realising that sustainability through education.
Brilliant. Thanks so much. And I think, again, that link to the wider Sustainable Development Goals, the wider human rights framework is really important as well. And education is often described as a human rights multiplier, which I think is really important, that education sitting right at the heart of all of this. And yeah, the tough job now, Professor Higgins, is to come last in a panel of 4. I do promise I'll switch the order around as we go, so you won't always be following, but I know you'll have some great things to say anyway.
I don't mind at all. I could just say what they said and finish there. But yeah, I will say a few things. there's a quote I'm very fond of, and it goes a bit like this: the role of education is to form the citizen. The citizen is a person who, if needs be, can refound civilization. Now, that may seem
again, so that's a well-rounded, sophisticated way of essentially implying that it's about creating little activists for change. You see, no matter what way you cut it, they've got it good. They insinuate, they imply, and they've got everybody backing them. State power, state-sanctioned power, etc. So the implication is obviously that, you know, there's a climate crisis. So that's justification in and of itself to promote this bullshit to children at all ages. But the reality of the matter is the climate crisis is a fucking a con job. I'm sorry, it is. It's a total con job. Nobody's disputing that the climate may or may not be changing. But the fundamental point regarding that is climate's always changing. And to think that you can just intervene and stop the climate from changing, it's just moronic. It's totally fucking moronic. But it's not about that for the people that are pushing this shit. It's about consuming or obtaining complete control. That's what this all fundamentally boils down to, is complete global control. When they implement all the UN rights, the human rights laws, etc., the charters, that's all United Nations laws. So essentially, you already see that shit now anyway with the Refugee Convention and all that bollocks. You know, you have to abide by what the UN says. But come on, like, just promoting this shit to children to create little activists. That is what this boils down to, no matter what way you try to dress it up. You're promoting your agenda to children at ages well before they have the ability to think for themselves. They've already fucking swallowed it. They've already consumed it.
A bit over-dramatic, though some would argue that the current twin climate and biodiversity crises suggest we are actually at this point. And I pretty much believe that we are. We really have got a few years to deal with the issues.
Says so calmly. Says so calmly. They all do this, so calm about it, you know. I actually take my hat off to the activists that put a bit of effort in, and, you know, they might cry, or because they might genuinely believe it. Who knows? But when these people sit there and they go, you know, we've only got a few years left before things become so bad and the world's fucked, you know. So matter of fact, maybe he's just so confident in all the human rights defenders who are all, you know, currently in their bed because they got school in the morning. You know, maybe they'll all come to their rescue. Quite what a band of school children and adolescents are going to do to save the planet is quite beyond me. The only thing that I think they will be able to do quite successfully is completely submit and comply. Words that we've been hearing quite a lot when it comes to the coof, eh?
We face today. But however, even if we're not, the idea of the ultimate purpose of education being to help civilization move forward, respectful of current and future generations and of global biodiversity, upon which we utterly depend, seems to me to be entirely logical and moral, and actually a beautiful thought. And as for the focus of education, you know, Emily said it really. She used the core capacities that we've talked about in the development of learning for sustainability as a concept for Scottish schools. And I've really nothing much more to add other than the idea that we think of ourselves as respectful of the natural world rather than just users or even conservers or managers. We need to develop that notion of respect with regard to the natural world as well as with all others on this planet. Thanks, Bruce.
Brilliant. Thank you. And I think
just fucking waffle. Now I'm realizing this video's getting long. I said I wasn't going to make a long video, so I'm 11 minutes into this. God, so what I'm going to try and do is, I have watched this, so I'm going to try and find the bits that really pissed me off, and I'm going to try and leave it there. Which, admittedly, is a bit of a problem, because I've spent 43 minutes going mental to a certain extent. So all the juicy bits, if you will come near the end, and many people probably won't watch till the end, which I've gone and fucked it up all again, but hey-ho.
Really important part in supporting a young person's development and learning experience, especially when it comes to sustainability. If we get young people outside more, it's much better than being in a classroom and learning about it. But I think ultimately it's just as important, and making sure young people have a say in that education as well. They're co-designing that curriculum, and they know what they're going to be learning about and what they.
Let's get young people to co-design their own curriculum. Yeah, of course. Will this be before or after they've got all the necessary skills and information sets already drilled into their head regarding sustainability and social justice, etc.? Or will that be before? So will they have a choice on whether or not they want to learn about learning for sustainability, or will they get to co-design their curriculum after they've been taught about learning for sustainability and all that includes? I wonder. I fucking wonder, eh?
Yeah, they've got an active say in how they're learning as well. I think are all really important parts, because young people very much have to be on this journey, and obviously young people are very much at the forefront of this as well. Young people have to be brought along with us on this journey, not be told what to do when it comes to this. Because as Emily so rightly said,
They can't be told what to do. Yeah, again, the weird dynamic in Scotland, not just Scotland when it comes to this shit, but Scotland nonetheless. You know, the weird dynamic that's been created here. No, it's well beyond a wedge between parent and child, and it's just this weird relationship between authority, government, and child, where they're trying to create this notion that children are akin to an adult. You know, they are just the exact same as an adult. If they can think and talk and walk, they are just the same as an adult. The only difference is that one is defined as an adult and one is not. So they can't be told what to do. Oh, no, they need to be empowered. It's just weird. Uncomfortable.
You can't make informed action if you don't have that learning base.
The learning base in this instance being learning for sustainability, yes.
Yeah, I think that's a hugely important point. And again, that point about participation and making sure that children and young people of all ages are actually actively involved in designing and being part of how their education is delivered inside and outside the classroom. And so, good opportunity to come to you, Dave, here in terms of what's the importance of the quality of education. What makes quality education?
Yeah, so all the things that have been talked about, but one of the key things is investment and support in teachers. And that is something which is obviously fundamental. You would think it would be a given. But actually, in terms of where we need to get to, in terms of sustainability and climate education, that just...
So essentially what you mean is you need to retrain teachers. Teachers need to be equipped with the skills necessary to brainwash children. Fucking hell. Wow. You know, how else are we going to get to where we need to be? And who decided where we need to be? Who's deciding where we need to be? Where do we need to be? Oh, well, we need to be in a position where sustainability and climate education are quick and easy to deliver.
Just won't come out of ether. Actually, that means, putting the
agenda that has been created for us by people, malevolent people, it won't just come out of the ether. Oh, no. Our children need to be brainwashed and our teachers need to be equipped to brainwash them, you see. Says Bulby Dave, the professor. Fuck off, Dave, mate.
Time into teacher training, into making sure they've got the time and the resources. One of the things, so I mainly work on climate change. One of the things there is there's loads of resources out there on climate change, but the quality question is a really good one, because actually not all of those resources might be as high quality as others. And as an educator,
some of them might deviate from the narrative we're trying to push here.
Having help in terms of that quality assessment, what's useful, making sure it fits with what you've got to actually deliver in the class.
You can only talk about the things that promote the narrative,
That's a vital part of where we're starting to get to, but we need to, I think, do better on that, so that when you're in front of a class, whether it's out on a field trip or in a physical class or online, you feel confident to be able to deliver that education in a high quality way.
Absolutely. I think that's the really important part about supporting the system and where the support needs to be and the duty on the state to provide that. And Pete, could I bring you in here on that question around the importance of quality, but also maybe get any of your reflections on the quality and effectiveness of what's currently available in Scotland?
Oh, fuck off, Pete. I really need to press on ahead.
Particularly led by people like Pete, how sustainability has become, something which has to be delivered effectively within our education system. It'd be great if that happened actually down south as well. But I think we're at that stage where everyone knows we need to do this and do it better, but no one's doing it perfectly yet.
Okay, so it's a good answer, very nice and diplomatic as well. And so I'll come to you, Pete, but also I'm going to add into the question something that's come in from the chat, which I'm starting to see now from Bob Hill in Montrose, who's asked about how we add this into an already crowded curriculum. So is there an issue that something would have to come out of the curriculum in order for us to add this in? And how does it all fit together, Pete?
Right. Well, I think the first thing to say is that this is not my estimation, but Scotland is widely regarded as a world leader in learning for sustainability. And actually, when Emily made her first statement, some of the words she was using referred very closely to the terminology used in learning for sustainability. This was an initiative of the Scottish Government that started in 2011. And we have now learning for sustainability as an entitlement of all learners and a professional requirement of all teachers.
An entitlement of all learners. and a professional requirement. You see?
Now, this is remarkable. It doesn't really exist anywhere else. So all credit to the Scottish government.
But here in Scotland, we go above and beyond because that is what is the progressive way.
For initiating that and allowing us to work on it to develop this. It's also linked very closely with the UN Sustainable Development Goals.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Because that's what it is about. And anybody that thinks differently, I don't know what to tell you at this point. It's linked very closely with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Do you think that's a coincidence? Do you think that's by chance? Do you think that's just happened by accident? A happy accident? No. Because fundamentally what this is about is promoting Agenda 2030 to children via their education and dressing it up as simply teaching children the rights and the wrongs and preparing them for a world with a climate that's on the brink of impending doom. And the human rights defender, all that other bullshit that I've alluded to already. You know, it's very closely linked, as if that's just fucking happenstance. Get real, Peter.
Now, that isn't to say others haven't been doing really good work out there. And it isn't to say that everything's perfect here. The current situation is quite patchy, some outstanding practice out there, and other places where people don't really seem to see it as a priority. So there's elements of this that I think we can really improve. In terms of other nations, I would say, Finland is of course a world leader in education, and even though that's the case, it recently revised its whole education system to place sustainability at its core.
See, we're not alone. Other nations are doing the exact same thing because it's a global agenda. They're all doing the same thing, justifying it by using the same excuses.
Closer to home, Wales, of course, has made a great commitment with its Future Generations Act. And there are other countries in a recent OECD review, like Canada and Singapore, that did very well in terms of global competency. So there's a lot.
Global competency. Now, I did I cover that in that video I made? I can't remember. But Scotland did very well in that global competency test. And I remember reading through a bit of it, and it was like questions pertaining to, you know, accepting differences from other culture, all this bollocks, it's like progressive talking points, and the kids in Scotland, the youth of Scotland, were all very much on board with it. Why? Because I've been talked about it every fucking day.
A lot of good stuff out there, and we in Scotland are actually we're quite thoughtful in our approach to how we argue that we've got a good approach here. But there are things that are quite unique. For example, both Liam and Emily referred to the importance of outdoor learning as part of our concept of learning for sustainability. And that engagement with the natural world is actually pretty much unique and very powerful. The research evidence is clear. In terms of that really lovely question that is very, very difficult to answer, the curriculum is crowded. But what I think we need to think much more clearly about is going back to the capacities of learners to deal with complex interdisciplinary issues, particularly through the systems thinking approach, and how then the subject disciplines become the servants of the core questions. And there has to be some part of the education system that allows that to happen. And that's precisely what Finland's done with its approach to the curriculum. It said, yeah, we're going to teach subjects, but actually we're going to teach these partially at least through this kind of systems thinking approach. They call it phenomenal learning or phenomenon learning in Finland. Now, we have the opportunity to do this at the moment because the SQA is being reviewed, revised, and who knows what's going to come of that. If I may say one other thing, Dave and I both work in a university, and universities are culpable here in requiring students to provide high-level grades in specific subject areas. We need to think much more carefully about the quality of thinking of the students we bring into our universities rather than worry just about the grades.
If I'm not mistaken, there's another reference at some point in this video where they start talking about, as I said, they move away from tests and exams and all this shit, and there's it there as well. Yeah, we just stop worrying about the grades. It's not just about the grades anymore. Very weird, very, very bizarre. That's the direction that we seem to be headed in. Is it because I'll be spending less and less time actually learning a damn fucking thing in their respective institutions and schools, colleges, etc., because more and more of the focus will be on preparing them for a sustainable, equitable world? Time will tell, I guess. It's very difficult to know. But when you've got people promoting that concept while simultaneously trying to suggest that, maybe we should spend less time talking about exams and tests, etc., one does have to wonder if the two are intrinsically linked in some capacity. I don't know.
I hope that helps, Bruce. Thank you.
It does, and again, it resonates very strongly in terms of a rights-based approach. Liam, did you want to come in and comment on any of that in terms of what you think might be going well, some of the examples that we've heard from Pete and Dave, some of the international comparators as well?
Yeah, I think there's a whole lot going on, and I think in many areas in Scotland there's some very good examples of how it's going well. But I mean, that brings in the issue that it's not consistent, but I think individually it's going well. If I take it back to even training teachers, I'm a student teacher, and throughout a lot of my learning, there's been discussion on how to integrate learning for sustainability, things like that, and climate change. Just mentioning it now and then, relating it back on certain subject matters, but also how to start thinking about, as Pete was saying, an interdisciplinary approach, but also a whole school approach, getting young people involved and making their own decisions in the school, and how can the school start acting more sustainably, making young people, again, as I said before, bringing young people on the journey with the adults and the teachers and things like that, to get them thinking about how we are making sustainable choices in the school as well. And we've got things like Park and Stride that are starting to come in as well, and that's about walking to school and things like that. And it's not just about walking to school, we're going to learn about why we have to walk to school, what's
conditioning you to the idea of never being able to have a private transportation, bikes for you or buses for you. But when there's lockdowns in the future and whatnot, you won't be able to go from A to B anyway. But it's fine, because you'll have been conditioned to stay locally with your 20-minute neighbourhood and your regional fucking lockdowns. Wow. So, promoting walking, which in and of itself there's nothing wrong with, but why we have to walk to school? Because driving to school is contributing to the climate. Everything's climate change now. It's brilliant. It is a brilliant little scam they've got going. Not these people in particular, but the people behind the entirety of the scam on the table here, where they can just implement any form of control they wish and say it's because if they do not do what they have to do, the climate will continue to fall in on itself, I should say. It's from a climate, man. The climate change. Fuck off, just fuck off.
How we're helping and things like that. And I think there's loads of good examples across the whole of Scotland with that. I think what we now have to...
In a gigantic world, in the grand scheme of things, when you compare it to the size of a human, I don't see how teaching a bunch of children that walking to school in any way actually benefiting the health of the entire climate.
Start working on is joining the dots and making it more joined up and consistent across the country, so all young people are getting a very similar learning experience especially when it comes to climate change.
Oh yeah, they need to be told all about it, yeah, of course, yeah.
Brilliant, thanks Liam, that's really useful again, as well as your perspective in terms of being a trainee teacher as well, but also the views of young people across Scotland through the Youth Parliament. Emily, did you want to come in on this point?
Yeah, of course. I think because I'm not working directly in education, I'm not a teacher, I think my impressions of the quality and effectiveness of the education currently in Scotland won't be as maybe up to date as the other panellists, but I do feel I might be able to sort of provide a bit of an insight on my opinion, because I graduated from secondary school in 2016, so 5 years ago. And my experience of that, going through primary and secondary school, I don't remember getting a lot of formal sustainable development education, particularly.
Neither did I. Nor did I get taught anything to do with man-made climate change. The only thing I actually remember relating to any of that was when I was in primary school, and there was talk of the whole ozone layer. Fucking hell. That's when you know I'm getting tired, man, flubbing my words. But that was about that. Never got taught about global warming, climate change, none of that bullshit, nothing to do with sustainability. The first time I ever heard of sustainability was when I was making YouTube videos and I came across that good old conspiracy theory, Agenda 21. And that was the first time. Then I looked into the Club of Rome, etc. All the shit, the Club of Rome. I think I remember rightly. It was them. Or one of the other groups anyway that were involved in this little cult cabal thing with the Club of Rome. They said back in the 1960s and 1970s that they needed to come up with a new catchphrase to sort of mask their agenda, which right on the top of my head can't recall how their agenda was worded at the time. But they came up with the concept of they came up with the concept of sustainable development. Yes. And here we are all these years later, and we've got Bruce Adamson and his baldy pal and the team here telling you that we need to import more sustainable development talking points to your children. Yes, for the climate, aye? Fucking nah.
There's not very many discussions about anything to do with sustainability at all. However, what I do remember is a lot of outdoor education. That was quite a strong part of my learning, and I'm not sure.
She thinks that there's a strong link between education, sustainability, and creating a good society that crosses lots of boundaries from social justice, inequality, and rights-based approaches. And Mark Langdon added in some critical thought around saying, is there a risk that we're focusing too much on the answers to climate justice lying in individual actions? And he suggests that might be misinformed when actually our focus should be on systemic and broader issues, and points to capitalism and colonialism being significant drivers of the issues that we're facing at the moment.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, it reminds me of COP, the global north, as they were calling us all. And they were saying that as we become green and carbon neutral, it was a form of decolonization, and all this bullshit. Oh fuck, wonders never cease. And then you have the talk of climate justice is racial justice. That's a whole another can of worms that's been introduced via the back door to children that you won't hear addressed in their little heartfelt wishy-washy stream that they've got going on here. Yes, reparations. Oh yeah, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Oh, I'm sorry, they've all melted now, haven't they? Sorry about that.
And also linked back to a question from Julie Marshall, who focused back on teachers and the thought that how do we support teachers, and more broadly, in fact, she's saying, so the first teachers that children have are their parents, families, and communities. It takes a village to raise a child, and so outside of the formal education system as well. So there's a lot coming in, which I think links very strongly with what you've all been saying. But perhaps, Pete, I'll throw back to you there then, because I think this links very strongly with what you were talking about in terms of the plan that we've got in Scotland for learning for sustainability, and bringing all of those different aspects together. So I'll pass back to you, Pete. Sorry, that's a bit of a rambling collection of ideas, but hopefully you'll take some inspiration from it.
I'll try, and there are a number of concepts in there that I'd like to refer to, but and try not to take too long about it. I mean, I think the first thing is to say that Scotland's got a really long tradition going right back for basically the past 100 years in terms of trying to build sustainability into education, and that's grown over the last 20 years.
Literally news to me, I will be totally honest, but I'm not looking into that at this time of the night. In fact, I do remember him saying that earlier on when I listened to it, but I forgot, to be honest. But there's no way, I'm not sure how much I buy into that, to be honest, but fuck those.
In particular, to the point that we are just now. And it's a big thing to do, to try to build sustainability at that level and at that scale. And so we're all doing what we can, but we're on that journey now. How's it going? Well, I think that process has been going quite well. But one of the things that's really helped has been the Scottish Government's commitment to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which First Minister signed up to the minute they were published, and then to build these into the National Performance Framework. So the
minute they were published, isn't that good, a little Nicola? Yeah? The minute they were published, she waddled over and signed us up. Didn't ask us if we were in favour of this, didn't even explain it to us, just did it. Because she's a fucking puppet, pardon my French. Just, pisses me off how she is like, remember there was a few years ago, there was even talk that rumours were starting to emerge that she was looking for a job at the United Nations because she's so, brown-nosed them for lack of a better term, bootlicking continuously to the point of embarrassment, national embarrassment. The UN fucking tells her to jump and she pleads them for praise upon jumping. It's none of the so how high routine. Oh no, it's was my jump good type shit. It's relentless. Every single thing that the United Nations do, she's like a dog, like a bone. Everything's United Nations dominated. Oh, the UN this, the UN that. Oh, what the UN want me to do today?
In terms of what we're hoping for our society to become, all you need to do is look at the picture of the National Performance Framework and you see all the same colours as the SDGs. But actually, that needs action in each of these.
Oh, and yes, again, the National Performance Framework gets mentioned. I mean, how convenient that our National Performance Framework, which apparently is going to shape our future, works so well, so interlinked with Sustainable Development Goals. Almost as if it was done by design, but that can't be right, surely not. Oh, God. Wonders never cease, almost as if the entire country is completely and utterly controlled by this regime known as sustainability.
in particular, it needs these to be integrated together through policy. And it's very easy to say, oh, well, this is the job of education, without realizing it's also the job of health. It's also the job of environment. It's also the job of agriculture, forestries, fisheries and food. So we need to be sure that our national policies are joined up. And if we do so, I think we'll get multiple benefits that will infuse the whole of society. In terms of the issue of the individual having too much weight on their shoulders, I feel that very strongly. It's a point that Mark made and you referred to there, Bruce. It's one thing for educators to help people to understand that our actions can have a significant consequence for other parts of the world as well as here at some time in the future.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's just a really namby-pamby way of saying that you need to completely change the way that you live your life. That's what it is. And you will change the way that you live your life, and you will live your life according to whatever guidelines are put before you. Again, you could argue you're being conditioned for that way of life now by the constant COVID regulations, nah? But it'll be a lot worse than that. Fast forward 10, 20 years from now. Mark my words, and if I'm wrong, fuck. But I ain't.
It is another thing entirely to encourage people to think that means I need to know how to vote. That means I need to know what politicians are saying. That means I need to be able to interrogate their answers.
And why are children being politicised? You know, another thing that doesn't make any sense to me is that one of their rights as well now, where they need to know all there is to know about politics. Yeah. Yeah, participation in a democratic society. I'm pretty sure that is one of their rights, if I remember correctly. Again, activism, brainwashing. First and foremost, you're telling them that democracy works. Oh yeah, it totally works. Yeah. Okay, that's why we're all on a one-way trajectory towards global sustainability. Yeah, no pushback from anywhere, and the old politician that's made waves of potentially deviating from the status quo has been shunned and completely slandered by mainstream media, by politicians, accused of all sorts, etc. You know, can't be having that. No, because our way is the way. Yeah. And just to ensure that everybody knows that, we will teach your children.
Their questions, interrogate their views and question them, and to be a really thinking, critically analysing individual who is suspicious, really, of the arguments that people put forward until you're convinced. So it's that restlessness that I want to see in...
But you're not going to get that if you're teaching children in primary 1, 2 and onwards that there's a climate catastrophe and all there is to know about sustainability and all the rest of it. Climate change, etc., etc. You are completely eradicating any possibility of critical thought ever amassing itself within these children's minds, because you are presenting narratives to them at ages well beyond their well before their comprehension, I should say, and you are steering them towards concluding themselves that the only way to stop the climate from burning us all to a cinder is to change our way of life and to change our society, etc. You're not presenting both sides of the argument. You're not allowing these children to come to these conclusions themselves. Oh, fuck no. We're past that point, aren't we? Because it's a fundamental global agreement, apparently. Global consensus, even Thin Lips is on board with this one, that there is a climate crisis because they all declared one. Based on what exactly? Oh, some fucking reports from the UN. The same UN that's been making stupid reports or getting little lackeys and third parties to make stupid reports for about 30 to 60 odd years. All these stupid predictions that never come to be, all these lies, all these false promises, etc. Nothing they say ever comes to fruition. I wonder why that might be. 10 years and the planet's going to end has been a common theme for about 30 years.
In all of us, whenever we see a politician promoting one thing or another, or indeed, we
well, like when they're all promoting sustainable recoveries in the wake of a pandemic that even in of itself was questionable. Again, you can't do that now, because that's classified as extremism, according to you people. Yeah, you fucks.
We're exposed to fake news or whatever it might be. It's that critical thinking that will allow us to get there. And I want to see Scottish Government policy built around those sorts of values within...
He wants to see a Scottish Government policy built around those kind of values, where kids question things. You know, well, I think those days are well and truly gone, don't you, Petey boy? Huh?
The National Performance Framework and its policy infrastructure, really. So it was a rambling set of questions and a rambling set of answers. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Bruce.
No, please don't apologise. I think that was beautifully answered. And I think particularly the link to the fact that Scotland was one of the first places to sign up to the SDGs and then took the further step of embedding within the National Performance Framework. And we've also seen more recent commitments to the incorporation of rights. And so we've already got legislation.
Incorporation of rights. Again, this is United Nations law. We don't need their law in our society. But Nicola Sturgeon thinks otherwise. I fucking hate that bitch. I fucking detest the SNP, and I detest these people for pushing a concept that tries to tell you that it's acceptable to promote social justice and equity and all the rest of that progressive shite to a bunch of children, and then patting them on the back and calling them climate defenders or human rights defenders, etc. All you are doing is brainwashing them and creating activists for your cause. That is as simple and as clear cut as I can make it at this point.
Which is needing.
Talk about all these things, like, oh, Sturgeon's done this, Scottish Government done this. Like, that's the point I was saying earlier. The system is state-sanctioned support. Everyone's doing the same thing. There is no deviation. It's wow. It's blatant. There's an agenda, higher powers, all that type of thing. And all the governments are working in lockstep. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Amendment on the incorporation of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which has been interpreted to bring in a lot of concepts around respect for the natural environment and sustainability. But also we've got further commitments from the Scottish Government.
Again, so the UNCRC brings up sustainability and whatnot, and what they talk about sustainability, because it'll be their fucking right. They need to know all about it. That's what I'm saying. It's literally just a framework, UN law, etc. But in it, it gives the justification for them to then start going after children, essentially. The grooming process begins because there's a right to know these things. You do not need the United Nations, UNCRC, or any other stupid charter that they've conjured up to subvert in order for people to fulfill happy lives here. But I'll tell you one way that we are not going to see people having happy, fulfilled lives in the future is that if this end goal is complete. Now, obviously, Agenda 2030 is going to culminate in 2030, but then it'll be a 2045 or a 2040, then a 2050, etc., because this is Agenda 21, Agenda for the 21st century. And by the end of this century, well, the world will be a much different place to live in. Yeah, there will be the powers that be, they'll still be living high in the hog, eating their beef and whatnot, but we will be living in the Stone Ages, and we can all look back at the few, well, I say that, there'll be barely any newborns, therefore there won't be many people whites anyway, to look back at their ancestors, but the ones that did go on to have children, I hope that they will look back at their ancestors, people like Bruce Adamson, people like Nicola Sturgeon and all the rest of the gang, and the UN and the EU, etc., Biden, Trudeau, who you name it, who's involved, they're all in and out, puppets and all the rest of it. I hope they look back at their ancestors and just go to themselves, you fucking cunts, because that's what you people are. I'm sorry, this video's getting far too long. I'm going to have one last quick scan for talking points, but I really have to call it quits at this point.
Recycling is not going to stop climate change. So it is getting that understanding, that awareness of some of the issues in the system, and there are big issues, and that's part of that high quality education. It's understanding is top down and bottom up, and actually it's not working like it should at the moment, certainly in terms of addressing the climate crisis. And you only get that by a good systems understanding. So it comes back to that high quality education question.
Thanks, Dave. And Liam, did you want to comment on this point?
Yeah, I think I want to do a point of clarification as well. When I stated that individuals being responsible, that was based off of research when we consulted young people aged 14 to 25, and that was a piece of work mainly focused on the reduction of pollution levels. And one of the questions we asked was who has the responsibility for reducing waste and pollution levels, and young people ranked individuals as being the most responsible. However, they also ranked local authorities, the governments, and manufacturers being responsible as well. So just a little bit of reassurance and just redefining that. More widely, from a climate justice perspective, we know that global climate emergency is
Climate justice, fucking hell, man.
an issue of climate justice, where those who contribute least to greenhouse gas emissions are most impacted. And young people told us through those consultations that countries most responsible for the greenhouse gas emissions must be the first to reduce their emissions as well. So, point of clarification. On the kind of more wider thing about education again, I think. I mean, there's not much more I'm going to add to what the other three members have said, but I think the most important one that I'll always reiterate is about that co-design approach with young people, empowering young people to go down their own route on learning and designing the curriculum with them, and be that through the formal curriculum or more informal curriculum or the youth work and outdoor education, things like that. It wouldn't be a pile if I didn't do a plug on. I think we have to protect the right to youth work and making sure our youth work budget cuts are not youth work budgets are not cut.
He's commented on the risk, perhaps, that we're focusing too much on a curriculum which is about developing a workforce for industry at the expense of critical thinking and emotional or political literacy and well-being. And that links to a question of my own around the role of children and young people as human rights defenders. And
you see, that's essentially what has happened here, though, what he just said. We're moving away from a society that, how did he word it? Developing a workforce for industry at the expense of critical thought. Well, critical thought's disappeared completely anyway when you're being taught that, being a good little climate defender.
and emotional or political literacy.
But this is emotional or political literacy. This is where we're headed for now, though. It's all about emotions and political literacy, apparently, and sustainability, etc., as opposed to being trained up to head into the big bad world of work. Oh, no, those days are gone because, well, most work emits carbon, and carbon's apparently the root of all evil all of a sudden. I beg to differ on that front. It's my understanding, or I thought anyway, that as the planet heats up, it generates carbon. Carbon starts to come out from the seabed and whatnot. I think I've got that process correct, but they've taken carbon. They go, oh, look at the carbon, it's everywhere. No, it's there because the planet's heating up. So the direct argument that carbon is responsible for the heating of the planet is just nonsense. The planet goes through cycles where it gets colder and it gets hotter. Man, they've just conveniently picked carbon as the boogeyman, and here we are. That and all the lies, manipulation, deceptive graphs, and you name it, they've done it.
Literacy and well-being. And that links to a question of my own around the role of children and young people as human rights defenders. And I wrote to the Directors of Education.
Children as human rights defenders. It just sounds ridiculous. I'm sorry, it does.
Just last month, in the context of protest, recognising that the UN's recognised that acting as a human rights defender and protest has a really high educational value. And
the UN have recognised that going to protest provides high educational value. Oh, is that so? Standing there with a placard, a piece of cardboard with a sign or a message that is probably just written directly from a textbook that they've been reading in class. That somehow promotes educational value. Really now? I fail to see how all the children that were standing there at these totally organic and totally not orchestrated climate protests for the last 2 years on the bounce really failed to see where the educational value and all that was. We had little girls on camera being interviewed by all these leftist organisations that are all over YouTube and whatnot, and little boys as well going, oh well, we need to change our ways because the planet's burning, the polar bears are dying. Oh, this absolute waffle. That's what they're doing. They're just teaching children shit. But shit it is. But that's all you need to do when you're in the company of children at such a young and impressionable age. You can literally teach them shit, and they will suck it up, buy into it, and come out the other side as good little climate defenders. And Bruce Adamson and the team here will tell the world just how good they've been and how important they are. They are the future, after all. The most important group of people in the entirety of the planet. That's what they say somewhere in this video.
I'd be really interested in views on how kind of protest and education mix together, and how outdoor education, things outside of the classroom, how important are they in terms of the balance within class learning as well, and how much of this needs to focus on things like critical thinking, which I know many of you have spoken about, and kind of emotional and political literacy, well-being, understanding of the environment. So Liam, I'll maybe stick with you on this point, whether you've got any views around that.
Well, we're going to be starting education, Bruce will be here all night, but I'll keep it brief. I think Well, especially when you mention, yes, is my response actually. In general, I think in terms of the curriculum, we maybe focus too much on curriculum and assessment at times, and we need to start moving to more of an approach of allowing young people the opportunities, empowering them the opportunities to kind of not learn themselves, but to find out their own opportunities and things like that, and allowing schools to be there to merely guide them to get through that themselves. So yeah, I think I agree with Mark on that point. When you reference especially the protests and things like that, those are really important things to young people, because these young people aren't just going to protest to get out of school. They clearly are, really passionate about this issue. They're really.
Oh, is that so? So remind me again, how, let's just say, for argument's sake, a bunch of primary 2s or 3s, how did they end up becoming so passionate about these issues? Where did they get the information from? Oh yeah, they were being taught about it in school. So again, I really hate this shit. They didn't just organically generate and develop passionate views for the climate. They didn't just all become climatologists overnight. They didn't all just become young human rights defenders. No, they were introduced to these talking points without critical thought being introduced alongside it. They were introduced to talking points conjured up under the concept of sustainability in order to brainwash, push them towards becoming little activists, etc. And hey presto, you have them all out protesting, reiterating what they've been taught in school. And then we have Liam Foley saying, oh, they weren't just doing it to get out of school, no, they were past it. Oh, how the fuck did that happen, you little wanker? How do these people not understand or see what's going on here? Is it cognitive dissonance? I mean, you can't be that dense. You must understand that there is, at the very bare minimum, an element of why they think the way that they think is because of school and what they were taught, what they were introduced to, etc. How their education was presented to them. Come on, man, for fuck's sake, like, wow, Jesus Christ, like.
Their hearts in it, and if they feel that impelled that they have to.
Hearts in it. See, this is the difference between adults and children. Children, their minds wander, they're naive, they're innocent for the most part, etc. And if they genuinely believe that they're being falsely empowered, we know that much is true already. There's crap about their rights is drummed into them, or a lot of them. Not all schools are implementing it as quickly as others, I know that much, but in the schools in the areas where this is occurring, it's drummed into their head that they can make a difference. They're little human rights defenders. Their voice matters, etc. All that shit. Then they get falsely empowered constantly, which is manipulation or grooming, whatever you will. Then they get taught all about the climate and the crisis and the catastrophe and all the rest of it. And of course, at that age, they're going to have even more of a connection to it than an adult would, because an adult can sort of see the wood for the trees and see things a bit more rationally. A child may not necessarily see it that way. Imaginations run rampant, etc. So naturally it's going to appear as if they are more passionate about it than your average adult. But the reality is, I'd like to think as they get a bit older, they might go to themselves, that Bruce Adamson was a bit fucking weird, don't you think?
Out in the streets, they're clearly quite pent up about it and want to show their support for it. That's nothing.
No, mate, you are really starting to piss me off, Liam, mate. Because at the end of the day, these protests that took place all across Scotland and across the UK and the world for that matter, that was not just a bunch of kids going, let's go and protest. No, that was manufactured. That was manufactured from the fucking get-go. And what happened as a result of it, if I remember correctly? All the kids demanded action. And what did we see? Little Nicola Thinlips trot on out to go, oh, you want something done, do you? I'll declare a climate emergency. Oh, how convenient. Oh, yeah, fucking do one, man.
That the school should not be saying, that it's not your place to do that, because it absolutely is. It should be a school's place to say, yeah, get out there and do it.
Oh, yeah, of course. Well, if a school is promoting, if a school is creating or has created the environment that is allowing children to come into it as a pupil and exiting it as an activist, then it stands to reason that the schools couldn't then in turn go, oh, well, we might be responsible for you now being a political activist without you even realising it. But it's certainly not our place to say whether or not you can attend a protest. Of course, they're going to have to encourage them to go. It's not even a case of standing in their way or not saying it. They actively encourage the kids to go. So does the politicians in Scotland. I know in England it was a bit different, where some of the politicians were saying that it's bad that they're missing school and whatnot. But here in Scotland, no. School and politician alike all encouraged the kids to go out, because at the end of the day, that was their pet projects complete.
Because that's what it's all about. Show for what you believe in and things like that as well. I feel like I'm banging the same drum here, but if we get young people involved in designing their own curriculum again, that empowers young people to think it's not just about learning to pass an exam.
And I think finally, the idea of protest as being an educational endeavour, maybe that's where the classroom is now. The classroom is the protests. The classroom is wherever the young people are, not just when they're in school, to think about what they can learn from wherever they are and whomever they are with. That, for me, is the mark of truly engaging young people in recognising the beauty of being a lifelong learner, which is what we have.
Learning, yeah, all these buzzwords that you'll be filling them up with. But, at the end of the day, what happened to it? Letting kids just be kids, Is that a concept too far gone these days? We can't have that, Let the innocence of children prevail. No, can't have that. Nope. Because there's an agenda to promote. Of course.
Have to aspire to.
Thanks, Pete. And again, that's picked up so well, I think, on some of the things that are coming through in the comments. Kirsten Leask was talking about this kind of education as a lifelong process and how we engage with people, and that link to the media that you added in there, I think, is really important. And a lot around how we can make sure that learning happens everywhere. In terms of children and young people being citizens or rights holders from a rights perspective, that's from birth. And in fact, very young children are already able to engage in a really active way in lots of these discussions. Some fantastic work by the Children's Parliament and primary.
See, even children at a very young age are able to participate. I'm sorry. Based on what metric? Or whose judgment? Yours. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they present climate change to children that are a very young age, as he said. I don't know what he means by that, but I can assume it's probably primary one. The youngest you can be, maybe nursery, potentially, I don't know. But as long as they can understand what's being said to them, even if it's the bare minimum, they can respond. And again, probably it will be in very stupid form for the children of such a young age, but it will be, again, simple coercive measures, potentially. Like, what I mean is, they will present the argument or the problem, they will give them the solutions, give them a little nudge in the right direction, let them conclude it themselves. Problem solved. Then you just work on that as they get older. But primary, yes, primary, for fuck's sake, man.
Schools all across the country and in nurseries across the country. These discussions are happening, and so I think there's a lot that we can learn there. The democratic deficit.
Oh my! He just fucking said there is discussions happening in nurseries. I'm sorry, this video is getting far too long, but this is getting preposterous. So I will leave on this note. I'm sorry, this video is too long. He just said these discussions are even occurring in nurseries. So I will reiterate the point for the last time, and in fact, I'm going to get the goal up. By 2030, ensure all learners acquire knowledge and skills needed to promote. So not just so they know, they will be able to promote it themselves. Again, activism. They will have the skills needed to promote sustainable development, which will include, among others, through education for sustainable development and sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, promotion of a culture of peace and non-violence, the global citizenship bullshit, appreciation of cultural diversity and of culture's contribution to sustainable development. Right? Okay, is that all clear now for you? And of course, we've got Sustainable Development Goal 4, is it 4 or 3, where it's intrinsically talking about education, the right to education, and obviously to finish off we have Big Brizzy Boy talking about nursery children. So to summarise, they are promoting Agenda 2030 to your children as young as nursery age, and you don't even understand nor realise. Peace.